Howdy folks, and welcome to Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries with the mighty Jingles. Developed and published, although unfortunately, at the moment at least, only published on the Epic Games Store by Piranha Games. This is the sequel to a game that I've been waiting for the last 17 years. Yes, it's been that long since Mechwarrior 4 Mercenaries. And I absolutely loved Mechwarrior 2, Mechwarrior 3 and Mechwarrior 4. And I fully accept that there is absolutely no way that when you've been waiting for a sequel to a game for that long, when that sequel finally arrives, there is no way it is ever going to meet your expectations. I mean, just look at Duke Nukem Forever. But thanks to games like Duke Nukem Forever, I have learned to temper my expectations. And providing that sequel, when it eventually does arrive, is unlike Duke Nukem Forever and is at least fun to play, I am prepared to cut it large amounts of slack. Unfortunately for my expectations, and for Mechwarrior 5, at the beginning this game is absolutely terrible. And while it does become fun to play reasonably early on, and even when it does become fun to play, large parts of it remain absolutely shit. Your enjoyment of Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries is going to depend largely upon how high a tolerance level you have for plots that are less sophisticated than Saturday morning cartoons, characters who both look and sound like cardboard cutouts, atrociously bad voice acting, mission briefings that look like they were written in Turkish and then run through Google Translate into English, graphics that in some places wouldn't have been entirely out of place in 2002's Mechwarrior 4 Mercenaries, and the kind of music that a pair of 14-year-olds grinding out rock riffs in the comfort and privacy of their mum's basement would be embarrassed to claim ownership of. These are issues that plague Mechwarrior 5 right from the very beginning, and they never stop. And yet, despite all of this, eventually, the core gameplay is actually kind of fun. By now, you've had plenty of time to observe the tutorial running in the background, and in case you're wondering, yes, this is the game running on maximum graphics settings. I didn't believe it at first. I had to double check that I hadn't defaulted to low detail mode, but no, this is the best the game is ever going to look. Apparently it supports ray tracing on GeForce RTX graphics cards. Why bother? I think you could probably best describe the graphics as functional. In case you were wondering, I found the controls fairly intuitive. But, well, anybody who's played any World of Tanks will find the controls fairly intuitive. For those of you who haven't played big stompy giant robot games before, you control the legs using WASD, there's also a throttle, and you control the torso and arms, or turret, if you're used to playing tanks, by using the mouse. It's pretty straightforward, doesn't take long to get used to. The game does do a pretty good job of making you feel as if you are actually inside the individually modelled cockpit of your giant robot stompy bastard killing machine of choice. The medium mechs feel reasonably agile and reasonably powerful. The heavy mechs feel big and stompy and slow and powerful. And the light mechs feel agile, nippy and not very powerful at all. There is a drone camera that you can launch so you can watch yourself stomping around in third person, if you're some kind of heretic. For those of us who still cling to a few shreds of self-respect, the game is entirely playable from within the cockpit view, as God intended it. I definitely have to give props to Piranha Games for capturing the feel of being in control of a battle mech. Of course, you would expect them to be able to capture the feel of being inside a battle mech because they've been doing Mechwarrior in line since 2013. And it only looks as if they're using the same graphics engine. They're not. Mechwarrior Online uses CryEngine, this uses the Unreal Engine. It's at around about this point in the game, however, where I really ran up against the brick wall of some of the recurring features that really plague this game from start to finish. Over and above the extremely janky graphics, I'm talking about plot, voice acting and characterization.
Captain Mason, my sensors are showing multiple dropships inbound on our location. I'm showing over a dozen bogies. Captain, I think we're under attack.
let's go. We need to get back to the base.
Check out those cutting-edge 21st century graphics, kids. Now remember, kids, just in case there's any confusion, you know these are the bad guys because their mechs are red and their leader talks like this.
Get to the base now. I'm gonna try and draw them off.
By yourself? We can fight them together.
No. From what Rihanna says, there's too many of them. Don't worry, I'm just gonna distract them. I'll catch up with you. Now go!
Commander, the base is under heavy bombardment. I've ordered a full evac. You need to hurry.
Yeah, copy that.
No, sorry. I can't do this anymore. No. Let me just summarise the plot for you. Your dad gets killed by the bad guys because they're the bad guys. You have to care about this because your dad existed. Just in case there was any doubt remaining in your mind that the bad guys were the bad guys, despite the fact that they're all in red battle mechs, and they talk like this. When your dad knocks out one of the bad guys, the leader of the bad guys stomps on the head of the disabled bad guy mech just to really ram home the point that he's not just a bad guy, he's a really, really bad guy. You escape in your badly damaged medium mech along with your dropship, your chief mechanic and your chief of operations. And so with not only the graphics but also the plot recycled from every other Mechwarrior or Battletech game that there has ever been, it's here that the game actually starts. Admittedly, the writing and the writing is terrible, but the voice acting hasn't been diabolically bad yet. But that's only true because you just haven't spoken to the right people yet.
Commander, sorry to wake you, but our sitrep has changed. Head to the bridge as soon as possible.
Ah yes, here we have an example of a games writer who heard the word sitrep used in a military movie once, thought it was cool, but didn't really understand what it meant. The sitrep is a situation report, not a situation. The situation may have changed, which may necessitate a new situation report, but the situation report hasn't changed, and why won't she speak to me? Hello? I'm standing right... Look, you asked me to come to the bridge and speak... Oh, you seriously? Yes, she won't actually speak to me unless I'm standing in exactly the right spot. Yes, really.
Commander, good to see you up. We haven't really had a chance to speak since your father was killed. I'm not much for sentimentality, but I worked with your father for a long time. He was a good man. Hell, he sacrificed his life.
Don't worry, I'm not going to make you listen to too much more of this. I don't actually have any major issues with the voice acting of your Chief of Operations, even if she does look like a refugee from the original Deus Ex, or somebody took a picture of her, digitised it badly and printed it out on a life-size piece of cardboard. But the voice acting itself certainly isn't terrible. I mean, it'll do. It's a perfectly good representation of a regional Northern English accent. So, yeah, she's fine, even if she looks like somebody cut her out of the back of a cereal packet. But wait until you speak to the chief engineer.
Hey mate, figured you'd want an update on the Centurion. Took a bloody beating back there, so fair warning. It's gonna be a while before she's operational again. Means you're gonna have to get comfortable with the light mech over in Bangor.
Oh my god. Okay, I have an unfair advantage. I am actually English. So I know what somebody from South London is supposed to sound like. That is shockingly bad. I mean, it's comically bad. That sounds like the kind of English accent that was done by somebody whose only exposure to an English accent was from watching Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins 40 years ago. If anything, he gets worse as the game goes on.
Hey boss man, that was quite the haul you brought back. Gonna make the repairs a bit easier now. But don't go getting stars in your eyes or nothing. I'm overworked as it is, and this shit needs a lot of loving, eh? So your Centurion is still gonna take plenty of time to fix. But yeah, like I said, nice job out there. Your old man will be proud.
Yeah. 2013 called. They want their graphics engine and 3D models back. So, yeah. All of this is frankly just a little bit shit. And it all stays just a little bit shit. It never gets any better. You're going to be listening to badly modelled characters spouting nonsense in shockingly bad accents for the entire rest of the game. And it's not just your crew. Check out the no expense spared animations on the holo table. Yep, it turns out that our financial situation is even worse than we at first imagined, because we can't even afford the budget to animate the face of the guy talking to us over the holo table. Seriously, how expensive could it have been to at least make his lips move? The mediocrity and general sense that developers couldn't really be bothered also, unfortunately, extends to some aspects of the mech combat. Now, obviously, I understand that when I get down to the planet's surface, I'm not going to have an entire planet's surface to run around on in my big stumpy robot. The play area, the maps and levels that I'm going to be fighting on, by necessity, are obviously going to have to be constrained. I get it, I understand. And a decent games developer will at least try to hide the invisible walls while they funnel you towards where they want you to be going. They will create unpassable areas of terrain. Oceans, rivers, mountains like these. As a gamer, I look at mountains like these and I understand that I'm not supposed to go that way. That's the game developer's way of telling me you can't go past this point. I look at canyons, narrow passes, and I understand that this is where I'm supposed to be going. There's a kind of unspoken language between me, the gamer, and them, the game's developers. And in fact, a really good games developer wouldn't even need to put obvious obstacles in your way. I mean, they'd probably still put them in there anyway, just as a backup. But a combination of a well-written mission briefing as well as visual cues in the landscape that will attract my attention to what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. A really good games developer will do things like this that will quite happily lead most players around the map by the nose, without the players really being consciously aware that this is even happening to them. And by the same token, when we as gamers see a side route that doesn't lead immediately to the main objective, we immediately think to ourselves, aha, a shortcut, or perhaps a secret level. What we don't expect to see are actual invisible fucking walls. How hard could it have been to either A, put an impassable cliff face up there, or B, not put a side road in here in the first place? I mean, seriously, when you run into something as immersion breaking as that in 2019, you really have to question the developer's commitment to giving a fuck. Because that is just lazy. Obviously, at its heart, Mechwarrior 5 is a game about strapping yourself into the cockpit of a big stompy robot and stomping around and shooting everything that moves. But there are other aspects of the game that, while not as glamorous, are equally important, because it's Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries. And mercenaries have to keep the money coming in, otherwise they go bankrupt. You have to keep the mechs operating, you have to repair them, you have to rearm them, resupply ammunition, pay your pilots, buy new mechs, or salvage them from the battlefield. And Mechwarrior 5 does accomplish all of this, at least competently, if a little unimaginatively. It's not the only game on the market that achieves all of this as well, of course, because unfortunately for Mechwarrior 5, Battletech exists, it's a year and a half old, and it does everything that Mechwarrior 5 does, except it just does it that little bit better. But what Battletech does not do is put you inside the cockpits of your creations. And it is here that Mechwarrior 5 is at least not shit. Well, it kind of is at first. When you're running around in your shitty 30-ton Javelin with your shitty medium beam lasers because your Centurion is so badly damaged it's going to take 2 months to repair. And you're fighting shitty little Scorpion light tanks that just kind of drive around in circles, shooting back at you every now and then and getting stuck on rocks, while you plant yourself face first into invisible walls in the middle of nowhere. That is pretty downright mediocre, but it does get better pretty quickly. You have to expect that you're going to be walking before you're running in these kind of games, and it doesn't take long at all before you're fielding your own medium or heavy mechs with a couple of lance mates to back you up. This isn't like Death Stranding, where you have to put a minimum of 7 to 10 hours in before it starts getting any good. Within 2 hours of starting Mechwarrior 5, hell, maybe even as soon as 1 hour if you skip all of the terrible plot exposition and dialogue, you'll be having fun. Even here, it's not without its issues and some glaring omissions. But at its very worst, it's at least competent. And when it's good, it is really good. Some of the issues that I'm talking about here are the glaring lack of electronic warfare or melee combat, which Battletech does, but for some reason Mechwarrior 5 doesn't. Also, your mechs are equipped with radar, but it's mostly completely useless. It only seems to be forward-looking radar, you know, right where you don't need it, because I can see what's in front of me. Especially given the surprisingly short range at which most of the enemies pop up. Yeah, a radar that lets me know what's behind me would actually be useful, especially when a bad guy pops up 200 meters behind me and the first I know about it is when he's punched holes into my vulnerable rear armor with his twin particle projection cannons. So, yeah, radar that actually works would have been quite useful. One plus point is that your lance mates are surprisingly competent. Not at all what I was expecting. Well, they're competent in most respects. If you have a target locked on, you tell them to attack it, they will attack it. They will form up on you. And left to their own devices, they do seem to prioritise targets reasonably well. And they actually manage to kill things. Where they're not so good is when you're on defence missions like this. There's one of the things that you can do, one of the very welcome things that you can do in Mechwarrior 5 that I don't remember being able to do in any other Mechwarrior games, is destroy things by walking through them. Which makes sense. You're a massive stompy robot after all. Things need stomping, and you're in just the robot to do it. Unfortunately, when you're tasked with defending an installation like this base, your lance mates have absolutely no compunction when it comes to doing a little bit of interior redecorating of their own, while trying to find the shortest possible route to whatever it is that needs killing. All while yelling at you to be careful because the base needs to be defended. You know, while they're busy stomping it into oblivion in their haste to get to whatever it is that needs to be shot next. So, you know, there's that. But on the whole, they're actually pretty good. And while the enemies don't seem particularly intelligent, I mean, you just saw that Locust run face first into one of my lance mates and then just kind of stand there looking a bit confused, waiting to be destroyed. The combat isn't easy, although they achieve that mostly by the sheer number and volume of enemies that they throw at you rather than any particular intelligence on behalf of the enemies that you're facing. Speaking of a general lack of intelligence, some of the mission briefings are hilariously bad, and I'm not just talking about the spelling errors and generally poor grammar. I remember reading one mission briefing where I was told I had to protect a base. Future and past tense, with the same subject in the same sentence. Awesome. But some of the voice briefings are, I'll be generous and say misleading. I can recall one mission where, as I exited my dropship, my dauntless operations officer informed me that the enemy base ahead of me, so I started motoring straight ahead, only to discover after about 30 seconds that I was running into another one of these invisible walls, and the enemy base that they were telling me was ahead of me was actually 90 degrees to my left. So, yeah. You know, it's little things like this about Mechwarrior 5 that just betray a general lack of care and attention that kind of permeates the whole game. So it's good that the actual combat, which is what we're here for, is as fun as it is. Because that's the one thing that saves this game. If not for the combat actually being entertaining and enjoyable, this game would fail on every level imaginable. The graphics are dated, mediocre in most places, surprisingly good in some cases. The voice acting is atrociously bad, the writing is terrible, the plot I've seen more sophisticated plots in Saturday morning cartoons. The music, well, there seems to be an unwritten rule somewhere that if you have a giant stompy robot game, you have to have a grinding rock guitar soundtrack, and I don't mind grinding rock guitar soundtracks, but could we please have a good one? I've seen placeholder animations that are more convincing than some of the crew character models, but at least the combat doesn't suck. I realise this isn't exactly a glowing recommendation for Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries, and if any of you out there were sitting on the fence about this game, because it's an Epic Game Store exclusive, this probably isn't helping. Well, actually, maybe it is helping. Because if you were waiting to see if this was the killer app that would make you create an Epic Game Store account, don't worry, it isn't. Quite frankly, Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries is a bit shit in almost every way imaginable, except for the one way that really matters when it comes to giant stompy robot games, and that's the giant stompy robot combat, where it's actually not bad, and in some places, rather good. Everything else about the game is at best thoroughly mediocre, but they did at least manage to get right the one part that really mattered. So, I don't know, well done I suppose. Actually, I suppose I really should give some credit to Piranha Games, because they have been doing this Mechwarrior combat since 2013 in Mechwarrior Online. And this is basically just a single player and co-op version of that, except it's better. One particular problem that I had with Mechwarrior Online was when you started taking hits, the screen would fill with so many particle effects that it was impossible to see what was going on outside of your cockpit, which meant you didn't know where you were getting shot from, and it was impossible to navigate out of the line of fire because you couldn't see where you were going thanks to all of the particle effects and screen check. So this is a vast improvement. Also, other improvements of note, the mech repair and loadout screens on your dropship. They've managed to simplify them enough that you can actually understand them and know what you're looking at, while still retaining all of the pertinent information that you need to really get in there and tinker with the guts of your mech. Because that was another thing that turned a lot of people off Mechwarrior Online. People would decide that they wanted to customise their mech, they'd open up the loadout screen, take one look, and then they just go, nope. It's just, ain't nobody got time to learn that shit. So that's another very, very useful and welcome improvement. So, overall, Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries. It's actually kind of shit in just about every way imaginable, but thank God they got the most important thing mostly right, and generally a lot of fun. Not much of a recommendation, but it's the only one I've got. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy the game. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.